Okay. Okay, Cassville Art Education here today to do a video here on kneading clay. So this is just stoneware clay. It's the clay that we actually use in the class that we fire 2 different times in order to then glaze to make a physical object out of the actual hard clay. Okay, so we're going to start working with the green clay, and I have a couple of different types of green clay here. One block of green clay, which is in the new clay container. It's sealed up. It is a chunk of 25 pounds of clay. Again, the same type of clay as this one out here. This one here is actually only a couple months old, where the one in the container is about 2 years old. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take the 2-year-old clay, we're going to mix it with some of the like month or 2-month-old clay, just to make it so that the clay is then usable for what we need it to do. Okay, so this is the very first step of making a clay object. All right, so I'm going to open this thing, and this has a airtight sealed lid to it. So anytime you put clay back into this container, just make sure that the lid is sealed down nice and tight. Otherwise the clay will actually dry out. And the other thing is when we put this stuff back in the bag, and you're going to see here as I pull this out of here, okay, we want to twirl the bag and then wrap it under the clay when you drop it into the bucket. Alright? So I'm going to move this out of my way. So I have 2 different clays that I'm going to mix together. One that's older, one that's newer. I'm going to have a clay board, okay, and I'm also going to have a kneading board. So the kneading board has a burlap on it, whereas the actual clay board itself is just a board with some texture on it so the clay doesn't stick to it. And it will stick a little bit, but not a ton, okay, so that's why we want this type of board. So regular clay board, kneading board with some burlap. All right, two things of clay, and then we're going to come back here, and we're going to use a clay cutter in order to cut some chunks of clay off that we need in order to mix this together. All right, my cameraman's going to follow me, and we'll have the boards that I'm using. So the boards are located over here. When you're done with the board, make sure it's cleaned off, best we can get it. Doesn't have to be perfect. And it can go right back in this location. There are some other like sculpting turntables and some other stuff that we'll get into later videos on using. All right. I do have an arch smock on. The arch smock is nice when working with clay because it won't get the clay on your regular clothes. A little bit hard to clean off your clothes. So again, use an arch smock. There is a selection of them here. And the other location we have arch smocks is hanging up right over here on the side of the cabinet. Okay. The cabinet below has our kneading boards. So that's that other board I have over there with the burlap on it. And then at the very bottom is where our clay buckets will go. And you see there's actually one here that says used clay. So if you get some clay that has a lot of water in it, not real good for doing the process we're going to do, which is kneading the clay and using it for a sculpture piece, you just put it in here, and typically it'll stay, fairly moist and whatnot until we actually need it. And eventually we can mix this stuff in with our new clay also to make it more usable. All right, so the new and a used clay bin. Make sure the lids are tight. Okay. All right, back over to our area where we're going to knead the clay. Get this 2-year-old clump of clay out, and I don't need a real big chunk of clay, so I'm just going to cut a corner of this off. Again, I'm going to save this bag, so I'm going to make sure it goes back in here when I'm done. And I'm going to carry this over to the cutter. You come around this. Okay, I'm just going to take the cutter and I'm going to run it. There's just like a piano wire on here. I'm going to run the clay block over top of it, just the corner. Okay, and it's going to cut a piece off. We'll start with that. Alright, I'm going to bring the other one over here, the other block. It's still pliable, but it's fairly hard, so that's why I want to mix some new clay what you're going to see here is I push on it, will push a lot easier. Okay, so I can indent this one real easy compared to this. So that's why I want to mix some of this in with that. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to take this over. You see how much easier that cut than the last one. When I'm done with the video, I'll make sure these are covered back up, picked up, put away. I'm going to bring these back over here. I'm going to use my kneading board. Okay, the kneading board is designed, this it'll semi-stick, this it shouldn't stick at all because it has the burlap on it. Alright? And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to break these in half again. I'm going to mix some smaller batches here. Alright, so I'm going to take half and half, the older stuff and the newer stuff. It does take a little bit of strength here. Alright. And basically you want to take and smash the newer stuff around and into this older stuff. Okay, now as I said, if you don't take some strength and really put some weight and some muscle into this stuff, it's not going to mix together. Okay? And what I like to do is I like to take and roll this stuff about 60, 70 times. Okay? Now what we're after is number one, making the old stuff more pliable like this newer stuff. And number two, we're after getting out the air bubbles that are in the clay. Okay, so that's why we knead the clay. Knead the clay to get older stuff better, and the main purpose is to get the air bubbles out. Okay, so what I do is I knead this stuff. Okay, I wedge it into like a cone shape. Okay, and you can see here as I get closer to the camera, you can see as I'm kneading it, it's just taking it and spiraling it. All right, so we're going to do a spiral motion. All right, and I'm just taking, so you can come a little bit closer there. Okay, so my cameraman here is just going to zoom in a little bit closer on my hands. And I'm pushing on the back side of the top of the clay here, and then I'm pushing down on the front. Okay? And I'm pushing into the board, making that spiral. Okay, and what it's doing is it's taking that old clay and it's just mixing it right in with that newer, wetter clay, and it's making the whole thing nice and pliable so we can work with it. Okay, so I'm just going to keep from having the boredom here of watching me knead this clay. But I just do this in that spiral motion over and over and over and over again about 60, 70 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And then at that point, it should be pliable enough that I can take the clay, form it into a block. Alright? Put it on the clay board, and I'm ready to work with it for my sculpture piece. Okay? Now, keep in mind that if you do not cover this up, this will harden up. Okay, and be no good also. So what we need to do is take some wet paper towels and paper towel dispenser. So you take paper towels, wet them up, put over top of this clay. Okay, and then we take a plastic bag like we have wrapped around our big blocks. There's extra plastic bags over there in the cabinet. And you cover up the whole board and everything. So the whole thing, so it keeps the moisture in. Alright. The moisture on the paper towels and under the bag will probably only last a couple of days. Alright, so you have to be prepared for like a weekend. Do extra towels or whatever it takes in order to keep this thing from drying out. Alright? Okay, again, when completed, wrap these up, put them in the new clay bin for the next person to use. That concludes kneading clay.